be today, but no promises. Okay. My thighs are nice. Okay. Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda have a rogil kamei daim bar Chama. Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda would often be by Rami Bar Chama. That was his Rebbe. What happened? He said his goodbyes. Shavkei va'azil Rav Sheshes, and he went over to Rav Sheshes. Now, one day he met his previous Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave him a little bit of a what we call musar. So he said, Yom Echad Pagabe. They met up. To Amr Lei, he told him a saying. Al kafta nachtan recha as liyad means when you're around the royalty, you think you smell like royalty too. Mishum da zaltalach lekamed Rav Sheshes. How Rav Sheshes? Well, you left me for Rav Sheshes, so you think you have the fragrance of Rav Sheshes? You think you're like him now? Meaning, like, why'd you leave? Because you want to be next to the bigger guy, so you can also be bigger. So he told him, no, I didn't go for those reasons. You want to go to the bigger name. That's not why I went. I'm like, no, I'll tell you why I went. I didn't go for that reason, just for external honor to tell people, ooh, I'm a student of Rav Sheshes. That's not why I went. Right, I went for the following reason. He said, listen, you, Rabbi Bar Chama, when I would ask you a question, you would respond with logic. And if we would find a Mishnah or a Brisa that would disprove you, we would disprove you. When I asked Rav Sheshes a question, Rav Sheshes kiba ina milsa, mine. Rav Sheshes kiba ina milsa, mine pashilemi masnisa. Rav Sheshes, when I ask him a question, he always answers me from a Tanaic source, a Mishnah or a Brisa. And then what happens when we find another one that's going to be disproving to him? The chinami mishakna masnisa uparcha masnisa or masnisahi. So what's going to happen? He always brings me a proof from a Tanaic source. So even when we find another Tanaic source disproving him, but that's fine, because you can say it's always two opinions. So he's more authoritative than you are, and that's why I went to him. So now why is this here? We'll see in a second. So Rabbi Bar Chama said, okay, why don't you try me? So Amar Lei, why don't you ask me a question and I'll prove it to you from a Mishnah? He said, fine, I'll ask you a question. Bo mine, he asked him, when you cook the sacrificial offerings in part of a vessel, let's say you have a pot and you cook the chatos in the lower half of the pot. And we're going to see more about this. There's a requirement for purging and washing. Either it's two forms of cold washing, or it's cold and hot. We'll see. It's two opinions in the next Mishnah, or in two Mishnahs from now. So in the next Mishnah, yeah. So when you only cook in part of a vessel, does this requirement require you to rinse and purge? Either purge means with cold or purge means with hot. We'll see. It's two opinions. Does that mean you have to do it on the part of the vessel that it was cooked in, like the bottom half of the pot? Or no, you got to wash the entire pot. So okay. Oh, ain tone. So Amar Lei, so says Rabbi Bar Chama back to him, ain tone. You don't have to wash the entire pot. Mida dehavi ahaza. Just like when blood gets sprinkled on the vessel, the chatos blood, you have to do spot cleaning, not a whole dry cleaning. So he says back to him, you told me that you're going to find me a Mishnah like that. There's no Mishnah about this. So he said, there's no Mishnah like that. Amar Lei, there is. I'm patterning it after clothing. Mistavra kibeged. It's logical. It should be like clothing. Not beged anatom kibas elamakom adamach anatom marika b'shtiva elamakom bishul. Just a clothing only requires that spot cleaning where the blood got onto. So to a vessel only requires the part that was cooked in. So to that he responds, Amar Lei, he told me they're very different. One penetrates much more than the other. Dam lo mefafeya. That means like the bubble doesn't go in so deeply. So therefore, spot cleaning is enough. A bishul, mefafeya, a bishul, it can go to part of the pot, but it can go to other parts of the pot as well. That's one. And Va'od, I have a brisa not like you. So this did not work out too well for Rabbi Barchama of why he lost the student. Yeah. No. Va'od Tanya, another brisa says, Chomer b'hazam Marika v'shtipa. There's a stringency that the blood staining has over purging and washing, and there's also the other way, rinsing and purging has a stringency over blood staining. Let's go one by one. When it comes to the blood, so it applies to both the inner and outer chatas offerings. And even before the blood is sprinkled of that sacrifice, if it gets onto the clothing, it's going to need to be clean. As opposed to marika v'shtifa, rinsing and purging. So we'll see right now. So what do they not have? As opposed to the rinsing and purging applies after the blood was thrown, meaning after the sacrifice has already been brought. So now we have to, now only when it's the time for nosah, only when the next day it's now prohibited to have remainders of the offering, then the requirement kicks in of washing and rinsing it. That's only going to apply after the blood was, after zrika, after the blood was thrown onto the altar, not beforehand. That's a stringency that the blood has over the washing of the vessels. Now let's go the other way. Yeah, chomer b'marika v'shtifa. There's a stringency of washing and purging. Shehamarika v'shtifa nahagaz bein kachim kadashim, bein kachim kalim. Whether you are a very sacrificial offering or not, it requires washing and purging. And bishel b'miktas hakli tam rikoshiva kol hakli. That's what we need. Even if you cook in part of the vessel, you have to rinse out and wash the entire vessel. Masha ain't as opposed to the blood, which is spot cleaning. You have an explicit brisa that says they're not similar. A vessel, if you only cook in the bottom half of the pot, the bottom third of the pot, let's say. So only wash out the bottom third of the pot. You don't wash out the entire pot. As opposed to blood, then it's just spot cleaning. So first of all, logically, there's a difference between clothing and the vessel. Secondly, we have a brisa that says not like you. So to that, Rabbi Barchama said, okay, I'm related. If it's a brisa, it's a brisa. What can I do? The time am I? What's the reason? I'm rakrav in between the if you cook it in a clean achoshes, sounds like if you cook, it doesn't say how much you have to cook. Even a little cooking sounds like you have to then clean the entire vessel. So you have to make sure you clean it out, but it doesn't say how much you cook. So it implies that even a little bit of cooking involves a lot of cleaning. Sounds like our houses, right? A little bit of cooking gets you busy for an hour. Yeah. Okay. So we said in the Mishnah told us that that there's a machlokas, the first Tanakam and Reb Shimon, does the lesser sanctified offering also require the requirement of marika v'shtifa? Now everybody agrees that they're going to have to two things. When we say rinsing and purging, there's an assumption that everyone agrees that to remove flavor out, you're going to have to use something hot. There's no novelty in that. But you still have to rinse it out to get out some of the residue. Rabbi Shimon, of course, agrees that you're going to have to remove the flavor that's inside the pot with heat. The question just is, does this requirement of washing and rinsing inside and outside the pot, does that apply to the lesser sanctified sacrifices? So let's see. Tana Rabbanan says the brisa chatas in the chatas kol kadashim minayin. It only says by chatas that you have to do washing and purging. So how do you know the rest of the offerings have the same obligation? Talmud lomar kodesh kadashim he has to be very holy. Truma. Well, if you're including all the sacrifices, maybe you should include truma too. If truma was cooked in a pot, you should wash. You should have the requirement of rinsing and purging. Talmud lomer osa, no, only it. Called the truma to exclude truma. That is different. Rabbi Yehuda. That's different in Rabbi Yehuda. It applies to all sacrifices, excluding truma. Rabbi Shimon Omer kachar kadashim tunim rika v'shtifa kachim kalan ain't tunim rika v'shtifa. Rabbi Shimon says only very holy sacrifices need rinsing and purging, but not lesser holy sacrifices. How do I know this? If kachar kadashim in kachim kalim lo. So he takes it very literally, only the very holy sacrifices and not the lesser holy sacrifices. Rabbi Yehuda said it was referring to sacrifices as opposed to truma. He's saying it refers to holy sacrifices as opposed to less holy sacrifices. Okay. My time of Rabbi Yehuda, I mean, this is Osa Lemute Truma. According to Rabbi Yehuda, I need Osa to exclude Truma. So, meaning, the pasuk says Kache Kadashim. Kache Kadashim literally means the more holy sacrifices. Chatas, Ashim, those. So why did Rabbi Yehuda, why is he so liberal and he included all sacrifices? Isn't Rabbi Shimon correct that it says Kache Kadashim, which comes to only talk about the very holy sacrifices? So to that, Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, but once Osa, he understands, excludes Truma, that must teach us that Kache Kadashim includes all the sacrifices. Because Truma is on a whole, so you have three levels. Very holy sacrifices, lesser holy sacrifices, and Truma. So if Osa excludes Truma, that means Kache Kadashim is going to include all the sacrifices. Because it wouldn't make sense to exclude Truma and only require washing by the holy sacrifices. It makes more sense that both sacrifices are categories of sacrifices are included in the obligation, and only Truma is excluded. That's Rabbi Yehuda's rationale. So, good. I've Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, Amarlach Osa, Kidamrina. Osa comes to exclude lower levels sanctity sacrifices. The Shlamim, then the Meiser, and the Bechors. What's with Truma? Shouldn't Truma need to be excluded? No. The Truma, lo bai, shtifu marika. Truma, I don't even need a pasuk to exclude it for me. It's for sure excluded. V'hatanya, but says the Brisa, Kideira shabishal babasar, lo yivashal b'chalav. If you have a pot that you cooked meat, well, don't cook milk. The im bishal b'no sein tam, the im bishal. And if you did, so then it's b'no sein tam. B'no sein tam means now what do? You had a meat pot. You just used it 5 minutes ago to cook your meatballs in, and then all of a sudden you're now cooking your mac and cheese. So don't do that. If you did it, what's the halacha? Okay, it depends. We go after, is there 60 times the milk to nullify the meat? If yeah, then you're good to go. If not, then you're in big trouble. It's now trade. So truma lo yivashal b'chulin. If you cook truma, well, don't cook chulin v'im bishal b'no sein dam. And if you did, right away you cooked truma, and then a minute later you ended up cooking your regular mundane food in there. So now, yeah, it depends. If there is 60 times chulin over, not 60 times by truma, I think it's 100. If there's 100 times of mundane food corresponding to truma, then you're in business and you're good to go. But if not, so then your regular food you just cooked has the status of truma, and if you're not a Kohen, you cannot eat that. So, but what do you see? That truma also requires us to remove the taste out of the pot, or else you're going to get into trouble. So, what are you telling me that truma does not need to be excluded? Because truma also has this problem. When it goes into a pot, you got to remove the flavor. We need this for the opinion of Mar, who says, Bishal b'miktas kli, ton rika v'shtifa, ton rika kola kli, but ha truma lo tzarech ela makom bishul. So you're right. Truma, of course, is included in this idea that it gives over taste. And of course, if you have truma pot and you're going to cook regular food a minute later, that you have to wash it out. So what did Rabbi Shimon mean when he said truma does not need, truma is already excluded for rinsing, it does not need a verse? What does that mean? It meant that everything else, if you cook partially, you only cook 1/3 of the pot. With a sacrificial offering, now you have to wash out the entire vessel. Truma, you're going to have to wash it out too, but only it's spot washing. It's going to be like spot cleaning. It doesn't have that same stringency as the sacrificial offerings, but not to, God forbid, exclude it from the idea that it can give over taste in a pot. So of course, truma, you have to make sure that there's no truma there when you cook your mundane food. However, it's not going to need the same stringency as the sacrificial offerings to have to wash the entire pot. You can wash just where the truma was cooked. Rava Amar lo tzricha ela with the Amar Mar. Rava says, I need it for the following. With the Amar Mar, b'mayim v'lo b'mayim v'lo b'yayin B'mayim below b'mazud. That which we require washing out the pots is with water and not with wine. With water and not diluted wine. Has to be washed with water. But by truma, it's more lenient. It's excluded. Ha'afilu b'yayin afilu b'mazud. You can even wash it out with wine or with diluted wine. That's fine. Third answer, Rabba Bar Ula Amar Lo Tzricha Ela the Amar Mar. I need it for the following: Marika v'shtifa b'tzone. That washing and purging is with cold. Now, this is the opinion we're going to see in 5 lines from now. Maybe next Mishnah? No, it's in 2 Mishnah. It's 2 Mishnah. No, next Mishnah. Either way, we're going to see that Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that the words Marika v'shtifa, the words that the Torah uses, are both referring to forms of cold rinsing. One is inside the pot, one is outside the pot. That's going to be a debate. The rabbis are going to hold one refers to rinsing, one refers to heat. Rabbi Yehuda says they both refer to cold. So, Marika v'shiva b'tzonein, but truma ha'afilu b'chamin. Even hot water is fine. So now, hanich l'manda Marika v'shiva b'tzonein, l'manda Marika v'shiva b'chamin v'shtifa b'tzonein, l'manda Marika b'chamin v'shiva b'tzonein, Michael l'meimar. That's very according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda has a special requirement that cleaning is specifically 2 forms of cold water cleaning. So therefore, truma doesn't need that. But if you hold that the Torah tells you you need to do cold and hot, so then in what way is truma excluded? That we say, shtipa yisei rasa. That which the Torah requires 2 forms of cleaning, one with hot, one with cold, is not necessary. Rather just with hot water is enough. You're an hour early for that one. Sure. Yeah.
You're so anxious to get started.
Yeah, we're trying to catch up to this now. So either way, we have 3 opinions. So truma is excluded from marika v'shtifa, from this idea of rinsing and washing it out. How is it excluded? So 3 answers how it's going to be different than either only part of the vessel, or it's going to be excluded because it does not. It can be even with wine or diluted wine, or it can either be just hot water and not cold water, or it can just have just hot water and not the extra cold water rinse. So 3 reasons why truma, if it's cooked, is going to be different than other vessels. Says the next Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Bisha Metchilas HaRegel Yivashel Bo Kol HaRegel. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, that this idea that you have to clean out the pots. So simply understood, it's going to be like the next line, that we're saying that whenever you have sacrificial offerings that are cooked in a pot, we're worried about nosar. There's a prohibition, you cannot leave it overnight. So you have to burn it. That doesn't only include the physical meat, it includes anything absorbed into a vessel also has to be removed. So simply understood, which is how we're going to understand, when is that going to kick in? So when the morning comes and you have to get rid of your sacrificial meat in the pot, so now go and wash it out. Wash it out, get the taste out. Rabbi Tarfon says you have the entire holiday to do that. Now that's going to be very difficult because according to Rabbi Tarfon, if let's say on the first day of the holiday, we're just in the Mishnah.
Yes.
Yeah. So according to Rabbi Tarfon, once you cooked it, let's say you cooked your chatas day 1 of the holiday. By the next morning, what are you going to do? How can you say you have the entire holiday where you don't have to rinse out your pots and remove the flavor? The next morning, you're going to be in a violation of nosar. So we're going to attempt to try to figure out what Rabbi Tarfon possibly holds. I'm just pointing out it's a big novelty because the nosar obligation kicks in the very next morning. And Rabbi Tarfon says you have a week to clean out your vessel until a week has passed. How do those 2 things fit together? So that's Rabbi Tarfon's opinion, and that the Gemara is going to ask about. So now, Chachamim say, Ad Zman Achilim Marika V'Shiva. Now, just to clarify, when we say you need Marika V'Shiva, the 2 words that Torah uses of washing out, Of course, we need a form of heat to remove the flavor. That's obvious. That the Mishnah is not going to tell us right now. That's because that's obvious. The only way to remove heat from the pot that was cooked with is through heat. However, there's an additional requirement to do marika v'shtifa, to do rinsing. Either it's 2 forms of cold rinsing, or it's 1 cold and 1 hot. It's an additional requirement to get the residue off. Right? So that's a very common kashrus thing. You have to first make sure the residue is gone, and then figure out was the pot used in the last 24 hours or not. So, marika, what does the word marika mean? Kemarika sakos, v'shtifa keshtifa sakos. So it means like the washing of a cup, just like you wash out the inside of a cup. Rashi brings, whenever you have a kos shel bracha, whenever you have a cup for benching that's used, or for a bris milah, or for a wedding. So before the next use, you have to wash out the inside of the cup. So to here, you wash out the inside of the pot. V'shtifa is a kos, and the rinsing is like the rinsing of a cup is done on the outside. So to here, you have to do it on the outside. Now, what do you have to use? Marika v'shtifa b'tzonei. So simply understood, this is going to reflect the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that when the Torah says marika v'shtifa, 2 forms of rinsing, they're both referring to cold water. Clean it on the inside with cold water and the outside with cold water. Now that's all good by pots. Now next page. Hashpud v'ha'achsala v'haskala. No, v'haskala magilin b'chamin. When you have the grill, the spittle and the grill, those things are used with heat that you could put hot water on. That you have to use hot water. That you can't use cold water. Yeah. Now this is interesting because this question is asked in the end of Masechta Avodah Zarah that we find by the vessels of non-Jews that are used, like a spittle or a grill. There, pouring hot water is not enough. That's called libun, pouring water. You have to do actual hagal. You have to actually blowtorch it, right? So Pesach, you have these 2 differences. Some things you have to do hot water. Some things you blowtorch. Okay. Now, Rabbi Tarfon is the novel opinion that says if you cook offerings in a pot, in a pan, you have the entire week before you have an obligation to get the flavor out. Why in the world does he say that? What does that mean? Says the Gemara, my time to be Tarfon number crow, Panisa Baboker Bahalaka. We're talking about Pesach. And there's going to be a lot of gray area in this line, so I'm sure there's many footnotes about it. But it goes like this. We're talking about Pesach. First day of Pesach. And it says, you go in the morning and you go home. Now, there's a debate amongst the commentaries, but they all agree it cannot be referring to the first day of Pesach. Either because there's an obligation to stay through Chol HaMoed, or Rashi says in Zebachim, there's a problem with the Techum. You can't walk more than 2,000 amos on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. So when it says Panisa Baboker, you could go back in the morning and go home, it can't be referring to what the pasuk sounds like the first day of Pesach. So rather, the Gemara understands it to mean it's referring to Hakasav Asan Lekulan Boker Echad. What it means is it's referring to the whole holiday as one morning. So therefore, Rabbi Tarfon understands that you have the entire holiday before you have an obligation to wash out your vessels. Now, there's going to be a big problem with this because we're going to have a number of other sacrificial issues that might come up that are relevant from one day to the next. Pigul, nosar, those things are not suspended for the entire holiday when you want to eat your sacrifice outside the right time. So if you have in mind on the first day of Pesach, when you shech when you're bringing up your sacrifice, if you have in mind to eat it past tomorrow morning, that's called pigul. Well, why don't you say past the whole holiday of Pesach? We don't say that. So that's going to be the problem. What? This doesn't make sense. Ain't pigul beregel. There's no pigul on the holiday. There ain't no sar beregel, and there's no such thing as leftover meat violations on the holiday. So it says there, maybe yeah, maybe there really isn't. A big novelty. The chitema hakanami, maybe you're right. There aren't these prohibitions. How could it be about Tanya Rabinos Omer, the Omer Rabbi Tarfon Elazubul that? It can be. Rabbi Tarfon said that only this washing is the only thing that is unique that you have until the end of the holiday. Only this. But Pigel and Nosar, the other violations, of course they apply. So if they apply, though, then you can't use this baboker in the morning as your source, because then it should apply across the board. So Ella, it's a specific logical deduction Rabbi Tarfon has that washing and purging the vessels, you have the whole holiday. Why? Very interesting. Ella Kedamar of Nakam, Rabbi Baravua, Rabbi Nakam, Rabbi Baravua, Kol Yom B'Yom Nase Gil L'Chavera. Every day you're going to purge out the remainders for the next day. Meaning, you have so many shlomim offerings on the holiday. So you tons and tons and tons of peace offerings. Everyone's bringing their peace offerings, communal peace offerings. There's so many offerings being brought. So what are you worried about? Day one, you bring a shlomim. Okay, shlomim A on day one, on a Monday, let's say. Now what's going to happen? You have, let's say by a shlomim, you have 2 days until it becomes nosar. Before those 2 days are up, what's going to happen? You're going to use the same pot for another shlomim. So it's going to take out flavor A and put in flavor B. So now you've extended it by another day. And before that day's up, what's going to happen? Shlomim C, you're going to cook. Remove flavor shlomim B from the pot and put in shlomim flavor C. So Rabbi Tarfon says, because there's so many sacrifices that are brought, therefore we're not worried about, there's no requirement to have to always be washing all the time, because the abundance of offerings itself removes the flavor from the pot and puts in the new flavor to avoid. So that will help us avoid the issue of nosar. And the Chacham argue, the Chacham say no, they argue. And we still are worried, and therefore every time there's a possibility that there's a flavor in this pot and past a certain time it's going to be forbidden, you got to wash it out. Okay. The Chacham Omer adds man achila. Now, the wording of the Mishnah is a little bit cryptic. It says, until the time of the eating, rinsing and washing, rinsing and purging. Well, that's a funny way to speak. What does that mean? So it says the Gemara, what does that mean? So what does that mean? So the same person who explained, Rabbi Tarfon explaining this too, what it means is wait until Zman Achila, the Hadar Avidla, and then wash it out. The Hadar Avidla Marika V'Shtika. Now, it's interesting. You could probably understand this in one of two ways. For example, when we have to get rid of our chametz, we don't wait till the violation kicks in and then get rid of our chametz. We get rid of it before the violation kicks in. The wording of the Gemara here sounds like wait till the morning, which now it's prohibited to have the flavor, and now clean it out. That's a simple word of the Gemara. But you could understand that maybe what it means is wait until the morning, but don't actually wait until that moment of the morning. Make sure that right before that moment comes in, you clean it out. I'm not sure which way to go. The wording definitely sounds like wait until the morning. Oh, morning comes, now clean out your pots. But that's very interesting, because usually we don't wait until the time of the prohibition kicks in. You're supposed to do it beforehand.
From the time you use the pot for the day till the morning, it's less than 24 hours.
That's achatas. Achatas, you use it as 8 in the morning, achatas.
Yeah.
So then you have until the next morning, 4 a.m. the next morning, to make sure it's gone. 5 a.m., whatever. By whenever sun rises.
Oh, okay. You don't have to.
Chatas is one night. That's it.
One night.
Yeah, Shalom, you have 2 days. So the wording sounds like when the morning kicks in, so then you have to. I'm just pointing out that it's an interesting thing. We don't usually wait till the prohibition kicks in. We try to avoid it beforehand. Okay, so imagine cleaning for Pesach right before the Seder starts. Right, that's not when you start cleaning for Pesach, right? So that's all. Rav Nachman answered the awkward wording of the Mishnah. What is the source of the Mishnah? Ben Abba. Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Abba ben Yossi, the son of Abba. It says Siv. The Torah says Umorak v'shote. Now these words will have more meaning, hopefully, at least for me. Yeah, it says Umorak v'shuta pamayim. You go rinse and purge it with water. That's one. Uksiv, the very next, the previous verse. One second. The very next verse. Yeah, the very next verse says Kol zachar b'kohanim yochel osa kodesh l'ashemi. It says Kol zachar b'kohanim yochel. So it says you wash it out. It says that everyone's going to eat it. So what does that mean? Ha-ketzad, mamtid lo ad zman achila. Wait until the time of eating. That's what it means. It means when the time of eating comes, that's when your obligation of washing kicks in. So the juxtaposition on the two verses is what teaches us that you have to wash it out at the time of the eating. Now, Marika Sakos, Shtiva Kishkazos, this is the opinion of Rabbi Huda. We're going to see Ton Rabban and Marika Shtiva Batone Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says both Marika and the Torah, the word Marika and Shtipa is both references to cold washing. The difference is inside the vessel and outside the vessel. No, Marika B'chamin. Marika means with hot water. The Shtipa B'tzone. Shtipa is with cold water. My time the Rabbanon. What's the reasoning of the Rabbanon? That they refer to two different temperatures of water. It says, it's parallel to the rinsing out when you have a non-Jew's vessel, and that you have to, just like there it says, whatever was used with heat, you have to use heat to get it out also. So you have to wash it with hot water. The Rebbe says, Rebbe says, I agree to you. Of course you need heat to remove the flavor. Like the non-Jew's vessel as well, the idolater's vessel. If they used heat to cook, you have to use heat to get it out. I'm talking about the special rinsing requirement. That does not have any reason why it has to be with hot water. Ki kamina l'marika v'shtipa. The basar hagala, that's after the hagala, after the purging with heat, the blowtorching out. So then, or the heating up to get the flavor out. Then you have this rinsing. V'rabanan. That's very good logic. No, what are the Rabbanan going to say? Meaning, everyone agrees if it got heated up, you have to use heat to get the flavor out. There's another requirement called rinsing and purging. Why do the Rabbanan require hot water? So they say, why did the Torah use two different words for rinsing? Obviously, if you use two different words, borak v'shatap, it's referring to two different temperatures. Rabbanan im kain l'terakra omorak morak v'shotah shotah. You want to use two words, stay consistent, use the same word. It'll be surely be rinsed or surely be purged. Why'd you switch? My morak v'shotah, two different words. Shma mina, very simply. Marika b'chadna v'shtipa v'tzonin. To teach you that it's two different temperatures. Marika is with hot water and shtipa is with cold water. The Rebbe, how's he going to respond? He'll tell you, morak, if it actually used a double language, the same word twice. Umorak, you would have thought, havamina trei zimni morak. Oh, trei zimni shote. You would have thought you can either wash it twice inside or wash it twice outside. Therefore, it used two different words to teach you, one inside, one outside. Marika is like washing of the inside of a cup, and shtifa sakos, and the other rinsing is the outside of the vessel. So each one is going to understand why the Torah did not use a double language in their own logic. One, because the fact that it didn't use the same word twice teaches you two different temperatures. And the other one says, no, the fact that it didn't use the same word twice to teach you that it's not enough to do two times inside or two times outside. You have to do one inside and one outside. Next Mishnah, Bishal Bo Kachin V'chulin. Okay, so this is like super overlapping with kashrus and giving over flavor. You have a pot. In the pot, you cook holy sacrifices and things that are mundane. Kachin V'chulin. Things that are sacrificial and things that are mundane. That's one. Or two different offerings. Kachim kadoshim, the kachim kalim. You put a chatas and a shlamim together in the pot. Now, what do? So the Mishnah itself is going to seem to contradict itself. It's going to be a little bit cryptic, which the Gemara is going to right away pick up on. But what's going to be the general rule? You just cook your regular macaroni, and you also cook your chatas. It's not exactly macaroni; it's dairy. You cook your regular rice, and you also cook your chatas in the same bowl. So now, if there's enough flavor to be given over, meaning that there is not 60 times the amount of mundane corresponding to the chatas. So what's going to happen? If there is not 60 times the amount, so then your regular rice is going to have now imparted flavor of the sacrifices. So it's going to have those obligations. Simplest understanding is, which is how we hold in halakha, the transference of taste is biblical. It's a big debate. It's called tam ke'ikr. Is the transfers of taste biblical or rabbinic? Rashi throughout Shas holds it's rabbinic. He's not the only one, but we hold that it's biblical. So simply understood, this is going to have biblical ramifications. According to Rashi, he's going to have to say we're going to have simply understood rabbinic ramifications. But we'll go with the general consensus that it's if it transfers taste, that's going to be biblical. So your rice will now have chatas flavored, chatas status rice. Yeah? Or you're going to have kachim, kalim. You have a chatas and a shlamim. Your shlamim, which is a lower level sanctity, is going to now take on a higher level sanctity. It'll be chatas flavored shlamim. So in yesh but no sanctan. So now it says the lower level sanctity will be eaten like the higher level sanctity. The aim to unim rika v'shtifa. Now here's where you get in trouble. The lower level sanctity, you have more time to eat it. Let's say you have 2 days to eat it. So if you have a chatas flavor in a shlamim, this line sounds like you don't have to wash it out. Meaning, one night has passed. If you're a chatas, you're going to wash it out right now. If you're a shlamim, you have another 24 hours. So on the one hand, we're saying it takes on the sanctity of a chatas, which should require washing right now. But the Mishnah says, and you don't have to wash it out right now. Meaning you could wait another day. That's the contradiction. We'll see in a second. The Gemara is going to ask. The ain of post and b'maga. And also another contradiction is, if the chatas was invalid, it had an invalidation. So if it gives that over to the shlamim should also have an invalidation. Yet the Mishnah says it's not going to invalidate it. What do you mean? If it gives over its flavor, it will invalidate it. So what does that mean? We'll see in the Gemara. But before we get there, mincha offerings, wafer mincha offerings, right? There's different kinds of minchas, flour offerings. Depends on the thickness of your pot, how thin it's going to be. So you have a deeper fried, or deeper panned, right? Deeper pans, and you have thinner pans. So a rakik is a wafer kind of mincha. Shenaga b'rakik, or you have one mincha wafer touch another mincha wafer, or b'chaticha, or one piece of offering touch another piece of an offering. So says the Gemara, lo kol harakikin v'lo kol hachatichos asurin. Let's say you have two offerings touch each other. So you want to know, is the new offering all prohibited, like the offering that touched it, or not? So the rule of thumb is only the place that it touched is going to be prohibited. So you can cut off that piece, let's say. If your chatas touched your bechor, your ma'aser, your shlomim, only the parts where they're cooked together. Where it's cooked together, you impart flavor into the whole thing. But where they're two hot pieces of meat next to each other, and one touched the other one, do you want to know, does the entire piece now become like the one that touched it? The answer is no. Only the part that's absorbed. Okay. So only your whole thing of rice now got touched by a hot chatas. Well, which part got touched? Right? I mean, that's that example. It's not, but let's say you're regular piece of chicken that you're serving. Oh, the chatas touched it. Okay, but where did it touch? Only the part that it touched is going to have the prohibitions of the chatas, not the entire piece of chicken, the entire piece of steak. So first, we're going to answer the internal contradiction in the wording of the Mishnah, the awkward wording. So ma'i kama. So basically, what we're going to do is have to fix it up a little bit. So it says they add an Amar of Yitzchak. It's like this. If you have enough flavor, meaning you don't have 60 that it's going to nullify the flavor, you have enough flavor less than 60, so then, and then of course, the lower level of sanctity sacrifice will take on these stricter dimensions. So a shlamim you have 2 days, a chatas you have 1 day. If a chatas imparts flavor into a shlamim, so then a shlamim now will take on the stricter qualifications, and you only have 1 day to eat it. And of course, you have to wash out that pot like the chatas, because it now takes on its status. And of course, if the chatas is going to be possible, it's going to be disqualified. And now it got cooked with the shlamim. Now the shlamim will also be disqualified. who post in b'maga. So, okay. Now, if it's ein bahem benosin dam, if there's 100 times of shlamim corresponds to a little bit of chatas flavor, so then it's going to nullify the chatas. So then, ein bahem benosin dam, ein akal nechol kichamur. Of course, the shlamim will not have the qualifications of the shlamim of the chatas. It nullified that flavor. So a little bit of milk falls into the whole thing of cholent, and there's more than 60 times. It's going to nullify it. So to here. The ain ta'un and merkav shliba, and you don't have to wash out the pot after one day. You have 2 days, like a shlamim. The ain post in b'maga, and if the chatas itself is disqualified, but now it got nullified because there's more than 60 times shlamim corresponding to the chatas, and therefore we're not going to invalidate the shlamim. Now, nehi de kachim kadashim lobo, but kachim kalim nibai. So even though the sacrifice, the more sanctified meat does not require rinsing out because it got nullified, but of course the lower level sanctity has to be rinsed out. Fine. Amar Abaye, what does it mean? Mai ein ta'unin the Amar. What is it when the Mishnah said it doesn't require? What does that mean? Kache kadashim aval kachim kalin ta'unin. Of course, it means kache kadashim that gets nullified. The holier sacrifice that gets nullified, its flavor gets nullified, does not require purging. But of course, the lower level sanctity, which is the primary offering cooked in this pot, will require rinsing and purging. That's one. Or maybe you'll say, or maybe you'll say the Mishnah reflects the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that lower level sanctity sacrifices do not require rinsing and purging. Okay, so now you have two opinions basically. You have Abaye and Rava of what that line in the Mishnah means. So either it means that that the lower level sanctity does require. They both say that they require rinsing and purging, but the question is, how do you get there? Is it because we're teaching you that as the flavor gets nullified in the lower level sanctity, therefore you don't have to wash it out? Or is it because, no, Rabbi Shimon holds that lower level sanctity does not require rinsing out? Yeah, so what's the difference? So the difference is, not what the difference is. According to Rava, the Mishnah is very good. The Mishnah, according to Rava, it's very good why it repeated itself. We had two cases in the Mishnah. Holy sacrifices cooked with mundane sacrifices, or holy sacrifices cooked with less holy sacrifices. So according to Rava, that said that our Mishnah reflects the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that says that lower level sanctity does not require rinsing and purging, it's very necessary to teach me that second case of the Mishnah. But according to Abaye, all Abaye told me was basically that if you have more than 60 times the amount of either mundane or lesser sanctity sacrifices, it's going to nullify the higher level sanctity. So why'd you say that twice? The first was, if you have more mundane food than you have sacrificial food, it nullifies it. Okay. And then you said it again. If you have more lower level sanctity food, it'll nullify higher level sanctity food. That's repetitive. It's the same principle, repeated twice, repeated. So what's the point of that? So, what do you need both cases of the Mishnah? Says or no, you do need it. Why? The Itana Kachim, if you only had the first case of sacrificial offerings cooked in your regular mundane chicken soup, so you would have thought, you would have thought that maybe, okay, a mundane food can nullify sacrificial offering because they're different species. And when you have different species, different kinds, they can nullify each other. But maybe you would have thought about kache kadashim, the kachim kalim. They're both sacrificial. Who says one's going to nullify the other? They're both the same category. Amalo, you would have thought that they do not nullify each other. The itana kache kadashim kachim kalim. If you only would have taught lower level and high level sanctity, you would have thought having a kachim who the alimi livetule kachim. Sacrificial things are so strong they could nullify other sacrificial things. But maybe there's a special stringency that mundane food cannot nullify sacrificial food. That's what you would have thought. Tzricha, we need that to teach you both, that whether you're sacrificial food or your low-level sanctity, if you have, there's more than 60 times of your flavor corresponding to the higher level sanctity sacrifices, you will nullify it. So whether you're a regular chicken soup or whether you're a shlomim chicken soup, it doesn't matter. If you have more than 60 times the amount of akatas, you will nullify it. And there's a novelty in that. Okay. Flour offerings or pieces of meat that touch each other, only the part that gets touched and absorbed is going to take on that sanctity, but not the entire piece. Anything which it touches. So it sounds like even if it touches it and doesn't absorb anything, that's also going to become holy. Talmud Lomar, it says bibsara. No, only the part that's in the meat, which means it got absorbed in the meat. Turn the page. Bibsara. Only once it gets absorbed in the meat. A sacrificial meat that's invalid, let's say, touches some food, you would have thought the entire piece of food now becomes invalid. Kamalomer yiga. No, it's only yiga. Hanogeya apostle. Only the part that you touch is invalid. So hold on. It sounds like just touching it invalidates or sanctifies, but it also says only the part that's absorbed, not the part that's touched. It has to actually be absorbed. So which one is it? So says the Gemara, so it goes like this. What you do is the part that got touched and absorbed, you have to cut away. If it's invalid, you cut that piece away. Okay. Now that's that. Bibsara in its meat, it has to be absorbed in the meat to get sanctity. Below begidin, not in the sinews. Below the atzamos, not the bones. Below bekarnayim, not the horns. Below betlafim, and not the hooves. Okay, in the meat, only when it gets absorbed in the meat will it become holy. Fine, and not the other things. Good. Yikdash, it'll become holy. Says the end of the verse. Lios kamoha, sounds like any touching will sanctify it to be just like it. You don't need it to have in the meat. So which one is it? Anything that gets touched will be like it. What was that one that everything touches? King Midas? Everything touches turns to gold, right? And then I started that in about 25 years. Okay. So anything you touch becomes holy, or no, only the part that's absorbed, it has to get absorbed in the meat. So haketzad. So how do you reconcile this discrepancy? Im psulahi tipasa. Vim sherehi tochal kit chamer sheba. What it means is that it's going to be what it means is that if it's invalid, if what touched it was invalid, it becomes invalid. And if it's valid, if it's kosher, so then it'll take on the characteristics of that which touched it. So, but it still has to be in the meat. It still has to be absorbed in the meat and not in other things. Yeah. Okay. Now, we have now a conflict. On the one hand, you have an invalid offering, let's say, that now touches another valid offering. And we say, well, now it becomes invalid. But at the same time, you have a mitzvah to eat a holy offering. So on the one hand, it touched it, it became invalid. But on the same time, and therefore you can't eat it, but at the same time, you have a mitzvah to eat it. So now the Gemara suggests an interesting suggestion. It says, why do we invalidate the whole offering? Say, v'neise asay v'litchi eslos asay. It wants to say, let the positive commandment of eating the sacrifices come and push away, to be doka, push away the negative commandment that you can't eat it when it's invalid. Now, 1 second. Yeah, so you have a contradiction. You have a mitzvah to go eat the sacrifices, and you have a negative commandment to not eat something which is invalid. So let the positive commandment push away the negative commandment. Now, Amarava, no. Ein asay docha eslo sasay shebamikdash. The first answer is an interesting exception to the rule. A positive commandment cannot push away a negative commandment in the base of Mikdash, meaning regarding sacrifice. Interesting. How do I know? There's a special requirement. You cannot break the Pesach bone from Parshas bone. Parshas Yishav. Yeah, it says that etzem lo sishra, you can't break the bone. So now a bone could have bone marrow or not, right? So Rabbi Shimon Manasseh Omer echad etzem yeshish b'moach v'echad etzem she'ein b'moach. Whether the bone has moach, here means marrow, doesn't mean a brain. Yeah, moach means a brain, but here means it has meat, it has some meat in it or not. You still can't break it. Now hold on. If that bone has meat, you have a positive commandment to eat the meat. But you cannot go break the bone and then eat the meat. So what do you see? The positive commandment of eating meat will not push away the negative commandment when it has to do with sacrificial offerings. Says Gemara, why not? Let the positive command and push away as Losa say. Ella, what do you see? Says Rosh Hashanah. The positive commandment is not going to be able to push away the negative commandment in terms of in the world of sacrifice. Yeah. Now, presumably, I'm just speaking out loud now. You could have asked the question, why don't you use this as your paradigm? The Gemara in Yevamos for 4 pages goes the other way, trying to prove that we do push away negative commandments. Why don't you use this to teach that you don't? So probably the answer is that when in general there's a rule, we don't learn mundane from holy. Holy has its own rules and regulations. So by the things that are holy, they have their own rules, their own category. Right? You can't learn from Shabbos to things that aren't Shabbos. Shabbos has its own rules and regulations. That's probably why we don't. Yeah. Okay, that's one answer. Rav Ashi Amar no. Yikdash asehu. He learns the word yikdash is adding another positive commandment to not eating it when it's holy. So you have a positive commandment, eat holy sacrifices. You have a negative commandment, cannot eat invalid sacrifices. And you also have another positive commandment that you cannot eat negative sacrifices. So that the rule is, whenever you have a positive commandment going up against a negative and a positive, that's called the ein aseh doka. Of one positive commandment cannot push away es los aseh ve'aseh. I understand that a chatas, you showed me, gets sanctified when it touches and gets absorbed in another sacrifice. But shar kachim minalon, how do you know that that's going to happen? That's going to work by the rest of the sacrifices. Amar Shmuel. Now we're going to quote a verse that seems to be extra, and we're going to go and interpret it all the way to the bottom of the next page. Amar Shmuel mishum Rav Lazar zoso. It says in the 7th chapter, 37th verse in Vayikra. After mentioning all the sacrifices, it says, you should know, by the way, Zos HaTorah, this is the subject of La'ola, V'lamincha, V'lachatas. The Ola, the fully consumed, and the Mincha, the flour offering, and the Chaz, the sin offering, Ula'ashim, the guilt offering, V'lamiluim, and the inauguration offerings, Ula Zevach HaShlamim, and the ones you bring for your peace offerings. So now, this verse is extra, and it compares all the sacrifices to each other to teach you what you find by one will apply to all. So, yeah, one for all for one right here. So, says the Gemara one by one. The first one is Ola, La'ola. Ki Ola. The rest of the sacrifices will be like an Ola. Ma Ola Tu'una Kli, Af Kol Tu'una Kli. Just like an Ola requires a vessel, so too, they're all going to require vessels as well. So, says the Gemara, hold on. Which vessel? Ma'i Kli. Ilema Mizrak. Mizrak, I think, is the bowl, right? To accept the blood, yeah. If you'll tell me that this verse teaches me that just like the Ola, you have a bowl accepting the blood, so to all the other sacrifices, you have to have a bowl to accept the blood. So it says the Gemara, hold on, but that's not unique by an Ola. It says by the communal peace offering. It also says But Yikach Moshe Chatzi Adam v'Yasim Aganos. Moshe took some of the blood, half of the blood, and put it into the vessels. So you see, by the peace offerings, you have vessels. Ella, you'll say it's talking about the knife. Ella sucking. You need a knife for doing what? To do the shechita. You have to have the knife. Just like the ola, you have to check. I guess no. Is that what it's saying?
Or knife where and that the ola itself requires a knife.
To do what? To check. I guess as opposed to what? You would think that you could do shechita in a different way. Or maybe you could do, I don't know. I mean, what would you have thought? Not a knife. Another vessel that will be able to kill the animal. So, no, specifically a knife. Now, how do you know that? How do you know that an ola, very interesting, that an ola requires a knife? None other than Yitzchak. From Yitzchak, that whole section, you learn out halachas of sacrifices. But ola, gufa minala, Avram went, then he sent his hand and he took the knife. Who said that's an ola? Maybe it's not an ola. V'hasam olahu, no, it's an ola. How do I know it says? Ola. Kachas, but no, take the ram and replace it as an ola in the place of your son. Fine. So that's the ola. It needs a knife. So too, everything else needs a knife as well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, continuing to derive the verse over there, mincha. There's also extra word. Flour offering. Just like mincha is only eaten by male kohanim. It's only for male kohanim. So, maihi. So, if you want to tell me that the mincha, who's this teaching is for? For itself? No, it's extra for somebody else. For who? If it's teaching me that a chatas and a asham also has to be eaten by males only, that's explicit. The hedik sibahu, kol zachar, the kohanim yochenu. Only males will eat it. The shalmei tzibor, the communal peace offering. Maybe that's what mincha teaches you. Only males eat that too. That's mirabuya dekrasi. That's coming from an extra pasuk. The kache kadashin tochlanu kol zachar yochaloso limit al shalmei tzibor. So that teaches you that the communal peace offerings are eaten by males. So says the Gemara, you're right. Tanahi, the next page. You're right. It's actually machlokas tanaim where you learn out from. Some will tell you mincha from this verse, and others will tell you from the other sources. That itself is up for debate. So therefore, some will learn from here and some will learn from other places. Fine. Chatos. Extra word chatos to teach you what? Just like a chatos is what? This is what we needed. Will sanctify something else that it touches by being absorbed in it. So that'll teach you to everything else that it will also sanctify the offering by being absorbed in it. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, good. Asham. What's asham? Extra word. Ma asham ein shapir v'shalya kadosh bo. Afkol ein shpir v'shalya kadosh bo. So, in asham, so the words are that a guilt offering. It's holy, but what's not sanctified is the fetus and the embryonic sac. Now, spoiler alert, an asham is only a male. It can't be a female. So, what are we doing now? We're teaching something which is impossible because a male can't have, last we checked, no matter how much it identifies or not, it cannot have an I can't pronounce it. Embryonic sac. An embryonic sac. So too, even to a female offerings, so the fetus and the embryonic sac are not going to be holy. Now, the Gemara is going to point out we're making two assumptions. So one is Kesavar Vlados Kachim B'Haviyasim Hein Kedoshim, that we only sanctify. There's two opinions. When does the offering? So an offering becomes pregnant. When is the offering holy? The one that's inside holy. from as soon as it's pregnant. Now that inner offering that's inside the vlad, the offspring, is holy right now, or only when it's born. So according to this, we're saying it's only holy once it's born, because an asham doesn't have a fetus or an amniotic sac, so it can't be holy. That's one. And v'danin, and two is v'danin afshar mishi efshar. You can learn out that which is possible, meaning female animals will their fetus will become holy once it's born. You can learn it, or say the other way, their fetus and amniotic sac is not going to be holy from an asham, which is a male offering, which is impossible to have a fetus and amniotic sac. So that itself is a debate. Both of those things are debatable. One is, does the fetus become holy when it's in the womb? And two is, let's say you slaughter the animal right now and all that, and it hasn't given birth yet. Is that fetus holy or not? It depends. When does a fetus take on sanctity? In the womb right now? Or no, only when it's born? And second thing is, also up for debate, can you learn things that are possible from things that are impossible? Yes or no? The reason by an asham why there's no fetus, because it doesn't exist, it's impossible. So can you learn that out to female animals? Yes or no? We're saying now that you could. Yeah. Miluyim, extra word by the inauguration offerings. What's that coming to teach you? Miluyim ma miluyim. Mosreihan b'sreifa. Ve'ein balei chayim b'mosreihan. Kol mosreihan b'sreifa. Ve'ein balei chayim b'mosreihan. It's a little more complicated. So just like the inauguration offerings, so anything extra, any offerings that were extra have to get burnt. No, sir, you have to burn it. That's one. And two is, there were no extra alive animals by the inauguration. They did not inaugurate, 100 animals and only use 9 and had 10 left over. That didn't happen. So too, let's say we have a case where we have a leftover animal. For example, a person sanctified 2 animals. One he sanctified in case other one gets lost, right? I'll use this one. So, and then you found the first offering. So we don't say that's considered extra and you have to burn it. Only one of them is going to be no. So you have 2 offerings. You have to bring one offering. But you said, I'm a little bit of a guy that loses my stuff, so I'm going to lose my animals. You know what? Let me sanctify these 2 animals. I need to bring one. But listen, if one gets lost, animal A gets lost, I have animal B to back me up. Okay, fine. And lo and behold, animal A gets lost, and animal B is used as your sacrifice. Oh, and lo and behold, a week later, animal A shows back up again. Right? It was hungry and needed food, and it came back to its owner. Animal A shows up. So now, when does your no-sir obligation apply? It's only going to apply for that sacrifice that you brought up. It's not going to apply for the first sacrifice. Fine. So
going to apply to the replacement.
no, yeah, exactly. That no, sir. 1 second. Right, so you'll bring one animal. The second animal is going to be extra, but that extra doesn't get burnt like other extras. And now you have an extra offering. So you don't have to get rid of it the same way you have to dispose of extra regular offerings. That's that. Shlomim, peace offering, extra word. Ma shlomim mifalgan mispalgan afkol mifalgan mispalgan. Just like shlomim, you're going to have pigel. We know pigel already. We're experts in pigel. You can have that wrong intention to eat it outside the right time, outside the right place. Not only does the animal become pigel, become, so to speak, repulsive, but also the libations that are brought with it become repulsive as well. So if your offering comes with certain libations, those are also going to be invalid. Not only is the animal going to be invalid, but even the things that are brought with it are going to be invalid as well. That's not only true by the shlomim, that's going to be true by every other offering as well. And it's learned out from a shlomim. So if you bring an offering with libations, and now the offering, you had the wrong thing in mind, and you violated pigel, so your offering will be, so to speak, repulsive, and the libations are going to be repulsive and invalid as well. Okay. B'masnisa, Talmud in the Brisa, Mishmei Rabbi Kiva Mincha, Ma Mincha Miskadeshes B'balua, Avkol Miskadeshes B'balua. So the Brisa taught us that Mincha, the flour offering, teaches us that when it goes into another offering and it absorbs itself in that offering, that becomes holy. Well, we have a chatas teaching us that, and a mincha teaching us that. Why do you need both? The itzrich lemincha mincha, the itzrich lemincha chatos, the iash ina mincha, the id the rechiva, the rekikasari, mivla of al-chatas emalo, a mincha offering is very soft. Flour offering, it's soft. That gets absorbed much easier. So there you'll say maybe it'll sanctify the next thing because it's really absorbed. But a chatas is much harder than a mincha offering. It's not as soft as a right, meat. Much harder than flour. So therefore, you would have thought maybe that's not going to cause holiness if it gets absorbed into another offering. To which we teach chatas, yes, it does. Now go the other way. V'yashmin and chatas mishum the courier. If you only had a chatas, you would have thought that a chatas, which is the courier is penetrates. It penetrates very deeply. Only such a thing will cause the other one to be holy. But a flour does not penetrate so deep. Of a mincha emalo, you would have thought that a mincha offering doesn't penetrate so much. So therefore, Rashi explains that because the chatas is meat, the fats go very deep inside. It really absorbs. It gets deep inside. When you one chatas mixed with another chatas, it'll get very deeply absorbed. As opposed to mincha, a flour offering, it's much thinner. It's not as thick, not as fatty as a meat offering, and therefore it's not going to penetrate as deeply. Be more on the surface. You would have thought that doesn't cause holiness if it gets absorbed into the other thing. Kamashma it does. Fine. Now chatas ain't ba elamila chulin. Now a chatas only comes from chulin, only comes from something which is mundane. Ubiyom, and it's only brought in the daytime. Ubiyado hayaminis, and only with the right hand. So therefore, afkol, every offering has to have these three patterned after the chatas. That's only from mundane things, and only in the daytime, and only with your right hand. Says the Gemara. Well, don't we know that already? So says the Gemara. First of all, the chatas I know a chatas is like that. Rav Chisda Amar Kra says Rav Chisda says the pasuk. The hikrim Aaron as par chatas asher lo mishalo v'lo mishal tzibur. That Aaron brought the sacrifice for himself from his own and not from the communal sacrifices. So he didn't use his chatas offering that he's going to bring from the communal offerings. He brought from his own, which is mundane, his own animals. So that's how you know it has to be from something which is mundane. Mishalo, below mishal tzibur, not from the communal offerings. Below mishal meiser, not from meiser. It can't come from the tithes. That's that. B'yom has to be in the daytime because it says b'yom tzaf so nafka. So sorry. So the Gemara says b'yom. I don't need a chatas to teach me that I have to do the offerings in the daytime. I know that already from where? From it says in the pasuk. It says the pasuk says Asher tzim Hashem as Moshe b'Har Sinai b'yom tzaf also in the daytime. So says the Gemara, you're right. B'yom tzaf nafka, you're right. Kidei nasma, you're right. It just mentioned the other one. Not that it was the source. We know that already. It just mentioned that a chatas is done by the daytime, but not to teach you that it's the source for everything else, because that we know already that has to be done by daytime from that other verse. Okay, biyado hayaminis with the right hand. So we said we don't need chatas for that. Whenever it says finger and kahuna together in the Torah, it's referring to the right. Says you're right. It mentioned the chatas is done with the right, not to teach you anything novel, just to mention it that it's done with the right hand, not to teach you that it's the source of how you know that every other sacrifice is also done with the right hand. No, that you know from other places. The ibais ema, or another answer is several amar etzba lo bai kahuna, but kahuna bai etzba. That when it says etzba in the Torah, so you don't have to mention the word kahuna next to it. You know it means the right hand. But when it says kahuna, that it has to mention etzba to teach you that's referring to doing the service with the right hand. I think we had this at some point. Yeah, we did. Going way back to the 24th page. We had this idea also. Different verses. It has kahuna and etzba. When does it mean right hand? When does it not mean right hand? So yeah. So according to this, that the word kahuna needs the word finger next to it to teach you the right hand. By achatas, it says both. It says both. with the chatas with his finger. The teacher that it has to be done with the right hand. Yeah. Okay. Asham, not asham, just like an asham, atzmosav mutarim. Its bones are permitted. Afkol atzmosav mutarim, meaning the meat becomes holy, but not the bones. 1 second. Right, permitted for what? Rashi says to make vessels with them. What does that mean? Yeah. Rashi says a similar explanation is they could be eaten. The bones are not just like the bones are permitted either to make stuff with or to eat, so too all the bones are permitted as opposed to the meat. Even an ola, that's not even an ola. The meat is fully consumed, but not the bones. The bones you could use. If you want to build your menorah for your school project out of bones of an ola, that's fine. How do I know? From an asham. Okay. Here we go. Let's try to finish the chapter. Now, this part is a little bit new for me, so I might need some help. Yeah. Amar Rava. Shitali. It's obvious to me. So now we're talking about back to staining clothing, yeah? In case you missed that. So we're coming back to it. Dam chatos lemata. So lemata here means below, meaning let's say the blood of a chatos, which is the only one that has to be clean. Let's say it falls first on your garment. And then what happens? On top of that stain, you have such perfect name, the ola blood went right on top of it. So dam chatos lemata, v'dam ola lemala. So if it goes, sorry, not exactly on top of it, but it goes on top of it. So then, for sure, tone kibus, because the blood touched the garment, and it got ingrained in the garment. So it has chatas blood inside of it, and therefore it has to. It went on the same stain. So you have dam chatas hit the beged first, then you have dam ola hit that part of the beged, part of the clothing. At the end of the day, you have dam chatas in the garment. You have to wash it. Fine. What about the other way? Ola first and then dam on top. Bayi Rava dam ola lemata but dam chatas lemala. On the bottom of your two stains is the first one is the ola blood. On top of the ola was the chatas blood. So now, does that garment need cleansing or not? Well, mahu mishum no geyahu. If all you need is, blood to touch the garment, wash it. Oh, dilma mishum baluahu. It has to be absorbed in the garment. It was never absorbed in the garment. The ola blood was absorbed in the garment. Now there's only room for one to be absorbed. If the ola hits and the chatas goes on top of it, so the ola blood's already absorbed. The chatas blood is not absorbed. So that was Rava's question. Hadar Pasha, then he answered the ain to in kibus. You do not need to wash it. So chatas blood has to be absorbed in the garment, not just touching, it has to be absorbed. If other blood, it's splattered first, and then the chatas blood splattered on top of that blood, so that is not going to require laundering. Yeah. Amar Rava Pshitali. Still new for me, so still help me. Pshitali. Dam al bigdo. You want to go and put your clothing that got impure into the mikvah. Now, we know there's something called a chatzitza, an interposition. It's chotzetz, right? You can't have a person who wants to mikvah. You can't have things on your body that's going to separate, block you. Yeah, blockage. So now, what about blood? Shitali that dam al bigdo chotzetz. For sure, blood on the garment will be a chatzitza. However, in tavachu eno chotzetz. If he's a slaughterer, it's not going to be a chatzitza. Now, this is more background information, but basically, biblically, a chatzitza is only that which takes, I believe, majority of that part that's going to the mikvah. If it takes up a minority, it has to be something which you're makbid on, which you're strict about. So a regular person that has blood on their garment is very stringent about that, and therefore it's going to be a chatzitza. But a slaughterer, a shochet, his clothes are always bloody. So that's not going to be a chatzitza for him. Now, rivav al bigdo chotzetz, spit on your garment is a chatzitza. It's a blockage, interposition. The mocher, V'im mocher revavu eino chotzitz. If you're a what? If you're a seller?
Grease in the garment.
Oh, there's grease, not spit.
Color of grease.
Sorry, grease. If there's grease in the garment, then we are strict about it. It'll be a blockage. But if you're a seller, if you're a seller of grease, all you do is sell barbecue sauce all day. Yeah, if some gets on your clothing, then it's not going to be a blockage. Yeah. If you have blood and grease on your clothing, what's the halacha? Im tavachu. If you're a slaughterer, so then tepel mishum revav. Okay, the grease will be a blockage. Im mocher revavu, tepel mishum dam. If you're a grease seller, so then you're always selling oils and things like that and fats, and so then the blood will be a blockage. So lo tzricha the avid havaha. You do both. You're a multi-talented individual. You can showcase and you sell grease. Yeah. So achada. So David havaha achada lo kapid atarti kapid. Do you say, listen, if I do both jobs, when both things are on my garment, that's really that's a blockage. I'm strict about that. That's one. Or you'll say, oh Dilma, no atarti lami no kapid. At the end of the day, I do both jobs. I have blood on me and I have grease on me. If both are on me, I'm not strict about that, and therefore it will not be a chatzitza. It will not be a blockage on my garment, and therefore you can toivel it, and it will be purified. That question remains unremained. Thank you. Hadron Allah dam hachakos.
Yasher Koach.